Hello there guys, my name's Deftonish and welcome back to Planet Coaster. I just wanted to start off quickly before entering the time-lapse just to say that I've changed the layout of the coaster slightly. It's nothing too major, it's just the coaster does a few more helixes now and actually kind of duels somewhat a little bit more. I wasn't really happy with the way that it was laid out towards the end of the coaster the last time I left it, so this is the complete layout now. As you can see, it's still got the dueling elements of the first bit, but as soon as it enters this kind of section down here, the coaster comes around, duels here, goes over some camelbacks, and then goes into some kind of helixes. Perceus actually goes over the track and then under the track, whereas Medusa kind of stays in one kind of straight section with a few kind of camelbacks and airtime hills, and then goes round into a kind of slow end to the coaster. They do duel pretty considerably well, actually. I'm kind of impressed with how well they did. I didn't really test it all that much. They just seem to kind of work pretty well. So yeah, that's it from me for now. The next bit that you're going to see is actually the time-lapse footage and the post commentary. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the new layout, and I will be talking to you pretty much straight away. So bye bye. Okay, so now that the little pre-recorded message is over, let's get into the time-lapse that I prepared earlier today. Most of this time-lapse is going to cover the building of the temple, well, the Greek temple, and the landscaping and foliage of the ride itself. I actually did some research for once. I don't often do research into the buildings and themes that I do, which is probably kind of silly because I kind of just build them off of memory, which isn't the best way to go about things. I don't really do things the best way possible. I leave things to the last minute and record them kind of weird and strange, but that's just me. That's the way I do things, very last minute and unplanned. Very spontaneous. I think that's the kind of person I am. So building this station was pretty easy. It was a very simple, very, very simple design, actually. I had to adjust the roller coaster slightly to fit the station, but it was nothing major and it doesn't really affect the length of the ride or anything like that. So yeah, it was easy to come across with. Now, one thing I am going to talk about later on in the episode is the queue line. It was very difficult to build a queue line that would fit this ride. It was strange to build. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to go into at the moment. Now, the roof for this building, first of all, I built it way too tall. The roofs for these temples are really not very tall at all. They're tall at all. No, they are very short, very stubby kind of roofs. And yeah, they have these little bits, like as you can see I'm building now, they have these bits of architecture that hang off of the side and give it that kind of unique look that I was going for really with the whole ride. I brought the pillars down slightly just so that they fit the theme of the actual building. Now I put here we go. We're building the queue line. This was weird. I wanted to give it a look as if it's climbing up to the gods or climbing up to a large temple. And if you've ever been to Crete, like I've mentioned before in the previous episode, and you've ever gone to the what is it, the Tomb of the Minotaur or the Labyrinth of the Minotaur, then you'll know that there is a massive amount of steps that you have to climb up. And it was actually one of the most memorable parts of that trip for me, because I think climbing up all of those steps, I was very young when I did it, and climbing up all those steps, I hated exercise at the time. Not that I was unhealthy, I just hated walking, and I kind of still hate walking now. I do it if I need to, or I want to get out of the house for a bit and do some kind of walking and bits like that. I get out of the house and I walk, because it's good to do that. It's good to get out and do things sometimes. Now, yeah, I wanted to give that impression that you're climbing up to the gods and that kind of thing. Now, you can see I'm duplicating the station because I wanted them to be very, very similar or exactly the same. I'm probably going to go back in and edit them so that each has a slightly different look to it, just so that I think maybe I'm going to make the Medusa one a little bit more destroyed, and the Perseus one will stay more kind of angelic and godlike, or at least demigod-like, because Perseus is not a god. Perseus is a demigod. The son of Zeus, and I can't remember who the mother was, but I think it was the wife, or at least if Clash of the Titans is anything to go by, it's the wife of a king or something like that. Either way, yeah, kind of not going off topic, but just kind of tangenting again like I normally do. Now, I actually researched, I think I said this before, but I actually researched into what kind of foliage is in Greece, and I was surprised to know that pine trees and fir trees are actually a thing in Greece. In large, like the alpine kind of areas, they do have this kind of nature around, which I was really surprised to see. I didn't really pay much attention when I was younger, when I went to Crete, about what kind of scenery was around. I never really cared, I suppose. I was more interested in climbing upstairs. Yeah. So, yeah, I was really interested to see that all these kind of foliages and things like that were around. So going back and building something that was similar to somewhere I've been was interesting enough as a concept for me to really be somewhat passionate about this project. Now, I know a lot of the builds I've done recently, I kind of get, I kind of stopped my passion after a while. I think KO4 was fantastic, but I think it was such a big project that I started to get a little bit like overwhelmed by it in the end. Now, it's something that I think if I'm going to take on a project of that scale again, it's not that it was a massive project, but if I'm going to take on a project of that scale again, I think I'd like to build it with somebody else. I'd like to kind of do a collaboration with somebody about that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd like to build a massive park, but I think for me to do that alone and do it as a Let's Play, it's going to kind of get a little bit boring for people unless I have somebody else to do it with. So yeah, most of this video is just nature, really. And there's not really much to talk about nature apart from there's a tree here and then there's a tree here. Now, like, I think the most interesting part about it is that it is I guess it's somewhat realistic to Greek flora. There are mostly bushes and trees, pine trees, fir trees, cypresses, things like that, but the cypresses are in kind of lower terrain. So yeah, and one of the main things in Greece is olive bushes, because, well, olive oil is one of the main exports of Greece, so there's obviously going to be oil around, or at least olive oil. Yeah, so this part that I'm building here is actually it's the pathways around the front of the ride. I wanted something that as you walk up to the ride, you're going to have this kind of beautiful flora and beautiful scenery that you're going to walk past up to the ride. I don't know if I want to include any more rides in the area. I might pop maybe one down. I think there's the like hot air balloon ride that looks pretty good. I might pop that in. It suits, really. I guess maybe I could build a little coliseum around it. I think I tried building a coliseum once before, actually, in a previous Let's Play. But yeah, you can see I'm just placing a lot of these down. There weren't actually any olive bushes in the game, so I used I think it's hydrodendrons. I used those as a kind of placeholder. They worked. They were pretty good. So yeah, that's the end of this time lapse. I'm going to be continuing this project pretty often, so keep checking back on the channel and you will see more of it. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode.